Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome and thank you for joining the ride. And if this isn't your first time listening to the show, thank you for continuing on this journey with me. So in this episode, I got your news and gossip-ish, and then I also have a Black History Month highlight, and I'm going to talk about Sweet Georgia Brown. And I also have the Royal Rumble recap and reactions to everything, because there's been so much that has happened, so much history that's been made from this Royal Rumble, and I want to discuss it and share my feelings about all of it. So sit back, relax, and listen to this episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. All right, so now we got your news and gossip-ish, and there's a lot of stuff to cover that's happened this week. So we're going to start from talking about Bad Bunny, who's rumored to be training for an in-ring debut. So if you've seen the Royal Rumble, or even if you've seen the Royal Rumble, you saw Bad Bunny did a performance of his new song Booker T, with Booker T sort of standing there like a statue and then doing his whole "can you dig it, sucker" thing in the song, right? So there was a backstage segment during the Royal Rumble that he had with The Miz and John Morrison, who was trying to get him on their team or whatever, but he was like, no, thank you. And they didn't take it well because they are brats. So, so then he came out there to start some mess with them. Bad Bunny came out there to, get at them because The Miz had came out during his Royal Rumble entrance and tore up Bad Bunny's DJ table. And so Bad Bunny came out there to fight him, and he basically jumped on them and did a splash from the top rope. And I thought that was really cool, because a lot of people think, oh, they're just gonna do a performance and then just leave. No, Bad Bunny is out here living his best life and his dream, because he had always been a wrestling fan. And if you listen to him, he's more of a Latin rap artist. In his songs, he does make mentions of different wrestlers like Booker T, in his song Booker T, and he even made mention of Eddie Guerrero in the song that he was featured on with Cardi B and J Balvin with "I Like It." So he really is a wrestling fan. So it's rumored that he might be training for an in-ring debut. This is according to Mike Johnson of PWIinsider.com, and that the proposed match will be against The Miz and John Morrison, even though there's no timetable for when it might happen. So it's also assumed that maybe his tag team partner would be Damian Priest, who did make his main roster debut during the Royal Rumble, and he's on Monday Night Raw now, which is great. And there was a backstage segment of them, talking to each other, in Spanish, because of course, Damian Priest is Puerto Rican, if you didn't know. So that was really cool, to see that type of representation. And it's also a cool thing because, he's such a huge star in the Latin community, and he has pop culture credentials. You see him in commercials for different things and stuff like that. So that's amazing. And it also proves my point that rap and wrestling can go together. But we're not gonna sit there and brag about that for the next 10 minutes. So yeah. Also in the news, we have an update on Chelsea Green and her health. So she made her main roster debut on SmackDown about maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. And during her match to qualify for a Survivor Series, she fell and then broke her wrist. So Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful basically reported that she's going through the process of getting cleared. And I'm really glad she's getting cleared, because I feel like there is always a need for new female superstars. So I'm really excited that she is getting cleared and doing, and getting ready to basically, take wrestling by storm, because she was in WWE, and she left and then went to Impact and became a Knockouts champion and all of that. And then she had her Hot Mess character, and then she went back to NXT as part of the Robert Stone brand. And she left him, and then she was gone for a minute, and then she made her debut on SmackDown only to get injured. So I would be intrigued to see her in a feud with Carmella, because that would be cool. So yeah, best of wishes to Chelsea Green. Also in the news, we have Edge reacting to what The Undertaker said about the locker room in this day and age being soft. So, as you may or may not know, Edge entered at number 1 in the Royal Rumble for the men, and he actually went on to win. So, he was asked on the Joe Rogan Experience, about what The Undertaker said about the product being kind of soft and that there's too much pretty and not enough substance. And Edge went on to disagree by saying, and I quote, "I think any comment can be taken out of context, and I think that's part of what happened there. In a 3-hour interview, I think they took most of the salacious 20-second clip. I think anybody, whoever steps into the wrestling ring, no matter what era, whether it be in the 1940s, whether it be in the 2020s, are all tough." And he went on to praise today's wrestlers for being able to balance, being a professional wrestler and handling everything that comes along with social media. He also said, "All got into this because they love it for the most part. And there's different challenges that come with every era, decade, and incarnation of what this business becomes. We didn't have the challenge that is social media. Now it's a great outlet in order to get your product out there, in order to make your brand bigger. But there's also a whole lot of hiccups and possible bumps on the road that come along with that. That's a challenge we didn't have to navigate. We just had to worry about getting to the building and producing. Now the cameras never stop rolling. Now every aspect of your life is under a microscope. That's an entirely different challenge than we ever encountered. It's just different is all. To me, anybody who ever steps foot in there is badass. Forgive me for cursing, but that's what he said. So it's pretty clear that he doesn't feel the way that The Undertaker felt about the product being soft. And it's like I said, wrestling, in my last episode, wrestling is very different than what it once was, and you can't expect everything to be the way it was, because you were like Undertaker's main prime was during the 90s, and this is the 2020s, so there's still so much evolving that wrestling has to do. And anybody who goes into that ring knows that they're not just doing it just to play games. They're going in there to be an athlete. And yes, there's the social media hype around it, and yes, there's the whole character point behind it that's also very strong as well. But all of it is meant for, a positive purpose. So I'm glad that Edge is actually taking the initiative to be, positive and uplift the wrestlers who are there now, as opposed to tearing them down like a lot of legends have tended to do in the past couple of weeks. So I'm really glad for him, and the fact that he's giving them rubs on the show, because he's been featured on Raw, SmackDown, and NXT this week since he's won a Royal Rumble. So it's clear that he's here to beef them up, as opposed to tearing them down and going into business for himself. So kudos to Edge. So also in the news, we have Rey Mysterio, who signed a new deal with the WWE. So basically he turned 46 this December, but he confirmed to Sports Illustrated's Justin Barrasso that he signed a new contract. And he said, "We never made the signing of my new deal public, but there's definitely going to be more time to see Rey Mysterio in WWE. I'm going to keep wrestling at least until Father Time catches up and says it's time to go." And also, it's really cool to see him, stand next to his son, who's finding his way as a wrestler and finding his identity as a wrestler as well. Because also, coolly enough, I'm going to talk about him more in the Royal Rumble segment of the show, but his son eliminated King Corbin in the Royal Rumble, and I thought that was cool. So I'm always glad to see Rey Mysterio, because he's in really good shape to continue wrestling. He's one of the GOATs of Lucha Libre, so I'm really happy to still see him there. And there's more stories to tell. So as long as he doesn't fight Seth Rollins again, that's all I care about. Also in the news, we have the somewhat unfortunate firing or release of Lars Sullivan and Steve Cutler. Steve Cutler used to be in the tag team, the Forgotten Sons, and then he was in the Knights of the Lone Wolf with King Corbin, but then somehow or another they disappeared and we hadn't seen them since. But Steve Cutler admitted on Twitter and said that he got released on February the 4th. He said, "Unfortunately, today I was released. It was shocking to say the least, but I am excited about the future and all the possibilities in front of me. Thank you for your continued support. 90 days, the countdown begins." Now, we don't know exactly what the countdown means, but I'm glad that he's sort of, finding a new thing to do. We don't know what this new thing is, but I wish him the best, in whatever it is that he tries to do. So also we found out that Lars Sullivan had been quietly released Because at first they were trying really hard to push him on SmackDown, but the thing is, anytime there was a moment in which it seemed like they were pushing him, there was something outside of the ring that would get in his way, whether it be him dealing with anxiety, or him dealing with some type of depression, or him dealing with stuff coming out about him online being homophobic, while also at the same time being exposed as someone who did weird things on videos. And I hate to put it like that, but that's just what it was. And with him possibly, spreading racist rhetoric online as well. He just had a lot of hooks and crooks to deal with outside of the ring. And I guess they decided they didn't want to deal with it anymore. It's like they were trying to push him this last time, and it just didn't truly work, and it wasn't truly resonating with people. So yeah, goodbye, Lars Sullivan. Deuces. And also in the news, we have the unfortunate passing of Butch Reed, Hacksaw Butch Reed. It was announced on his Instagram account with a picture of him with a title. Whoever's in charge of his social media wrote, "To everyone who reached out, God bless you. Today we lost a great man due to heart complications. Bruce Butch Reed passed away. Butch is in heaven now with the wrestling gods. I'm sure he is already booked for a heavyweight championship match. Once again, thank you for all the prayers. We will keep this page going in his memory. For funeral arrangements, send me a DM for information if you would like to attend. God bless everyone, and God bless in heaven, Hackshaw, Butch Reed." And also, he passed away at the age of 66, and it seemed that he had 2 heart attacks, which is a very rough thing to deal with. I know because someone close to my life has actually suffered with those, but survived. But it's really unfortunate, and I hope and wish the best for his family. Send healing energy and prayers and all kinds of thoughts and well wishes to his family and his colleagues who worked with him. Him and Ron Simmons, I know, were in a tag team where Teddy Long was also their manager in WCW, so I'm definitely sending healing and positive energy towards them as well. Also in the news, we had Parker Boudreaux, who has been revealed to have signed with the WWE, and he's endorsed by Paul Heyman, and he used to be a football player for the University of Central Florida, and he quit the team to pursue pro wrestling, and he signed a developmental deal and did a publicity photo with him at a Royal Rumble party with Eva Marie, who used to work for the WWE, Miss All Red Everything, who was on Total Divas and then transitioned into wrestling, and nobody took her seriously up to that point. And then she never got to the point where she really had like a match, but every time she got into a match, everybody was booing the crap out of her. So he missed last season in Central Florida. He was a starting right guard in 2019, and he missed last season due to a concussion, but he was to come back this year, in his senior year. But he was also seen backstage at the January 20th NXT television tapings. So he's 6'4", and he played the line at 301 pounds, and Paul Heyman has lauded him as possibly the next big thing, which is funny because that's the same thing he used to call Brock Lesnar in the early 2000s. So there's no word on what this exactly means, but it's always cool when NXT, can sign different athletes from different places, who are definitely homegrown in that performance center thing. So I look forward to seeing him do really big things, if he commits to it truly. So that's going to be cool. Now, we don't know what Eva Marie is going to do or what that even means, because there was a huge rumor mill that maybe she was going to come back, but who knows? So yeah, congratulations to Parker. And also, in the news, Sasha Banks, the SmackDown Women's Champion, is going to be the honorary starter for the Daytona 500 on Sunday, February 14th, aka Valentine's Day. So that's going to be cool. She's doing more crossover appeal things into different sports with Fox Sports, and of course her and her Star Wars star-making turn as Koska Reeves, the Mandalorian. So congratulations to her. And she also got in the face of Bianca Belair last night, so we're still pushing for Bianca versus Sasha. Anyway, so that is what's going on. And then also in the news, we have a former WWE superstar who was known as Tyler Rex, but is now known as Gabby Tuft, and she came out as transgender. So it was reported by NBC News, and they said that former World Wrestling Entertainment superstar Gabby Tuft said she left the house and walked with her head held high for the first time Thursday as she came out as transgender. And she cried when she recalled the moment. She said, "I felt so happy. My hair wasn't in my face, and I wasn't clenching my fists and hiding my nails. It just felt so amazing." And she announced it on Instagram. And she said, "This is me, unashamed, unabashedly me. This is the side of me that is hidden in the shadows, afraid and fearful of what the world would think, afraid of what my family, friends, and followers would say or do. I am no longer afraid, and I am no longer fearful. I can now say with confidence that I love myself for who, in all caps, I am." So she wrestled from 2007 to 2014. And she retired from wrestling to spend more time with her wife, Priscilla, and their daughter, and began a career as a fitness coach and motivational speaker. But she also said that her mental health suffered, in the midst of her career success. It said that the previous 8 months had been some of the darkest of her entire life, and that she was even struggling with suicidal thoughts. And even though she was preaching, never care what people think and go be yourself, it's like when it came to be her turn, it was so much more difficult than she ever imagined. So congratulations to her. I'm always happy when someone decides to live their full truth and decides to be exactly who they are inside. So if she can walk out in the world with her head held high, and that is all that truly matters. So congratulations to Gabby, and I hope she continues to live a fulfilled life. So that's all for news and gossipish, and now we're going to talk about a Black History highlight, and we're going to be highlighting and giving our flowers to Sweet Georgia Brown. Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, "Stephanie, how do you record your podcast?" And I said, "With the Anchor app on my phone." And they were like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, or download the free Anchor app to get started. Okay, so since this is Black History Month and this is my wrestling podcast, I wanted to use my platform to highlight Black wrestlers who helped pave the way for Black wrestlers now today. So I'm going to be talking about Sweet Georgia Brown, whose real name was actually Susie Mae McCoy. So I cannot wait to talk about her. This is going to be really cool. So Susie Mae McCoy was originally from South Carolina, and she was 19 years old when she started training with the Fabulous Moolah and her then husband, Buddy Lee, in 1957. And I know that even though the Fabulous Moolah had a very controversial start, which I will get into in this segment, she was one of the biggest female stars in America at that time, and she had a stranglehold on booking women within the NWA and other territories following the decline of Billy Wolf's monopoly. So she was renamed as Sweet Georgia Brown, and Sweet Georgia Brown made her pro wrestling debut a year later in 1958 at the age of 20, and she was the Fabulous Moolah's first Black student in her school, and Moolah and Lee had high hopes for the emerging fad, and I hate to call it that, but to them it was a fad, in pro wrestling Negro women wrestlers. But despite her fame and rise on the women's wrestling circuit, Sweet Georgia Brown lived in fear for much of her career due to the rampant racism of the South. And at some venues, she was smuggled in the trunk of a car so that the Ku Klux Klan and other extremists wouldn't be tipped off to a black woman entering arenas or hotel rooms. But it was seemingly that the most of the terror was from the people who she trusted to teach her the wrestling, and it was from Moolah and Buddy Lee themselves. They would take a whopping 25% of their booking fees off the top, sometimes even more, leaving the wrestlers with barely enough to survive. And in order to secure better booking for herself, she would systematically prostitute her trainees to other promoters, even wrestlers. And even Miss Sweet Georgia Brown wasn't immune to these practices. And it's really sad, when you think of what these women had to do in order to make a name for themselves, in the name of, and to make a name of themselves in wrestling, but then having to deal with a teacher who you probably confided in or whatever. And then it's like they're claiming to be one way, but then they're actually underhanded in another way. It's just terrible. But in October of 1963, Sweet Georgia Brown beat Nell Stewart for the NWA Texas Women's title, becoming the first black woman to win a singles title. And even though it wasn't a world's title, it was still a major singles title in one of NWA's largest territories. So she basically paved the way for people like Naomi to go on and win the SmackDown Women's title at a WrestleMania, becoming the first black woman to do so. And definitely for Bianca Belair, who I'll get into later on in this episode, for winning the Royal Rumble, and for Sasha Banks to win, the Raw Women's title and all the other titles that she's collectively won, and being a Grand Slam champion. So sadly, she retired from wrestling in 1972, and she passed away from breast cancer in 1989 at the age of 51. So here on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, I am really grateful for Sweet Georgia Brown and all of her accomplishments as a black female wrestler, and how she's paved the way for people like the wrestlers that I have mentioned, also for likes of Jacqueline and Jazz and so many others like Big Swole and Red Velvet and so many others as well. And I hope that we can continue to break doors down for black women in wrestling and black men in wrestling and and every other person of color in wrestling. So during the month of February, I will be doing more highlights of historic black wrestlers, and also people who make history even now and today, because history is always happening. And we never stop improving and never stop showing our excellence here. So, I'll probably make an announcement of who I'm going to do next week. But for now, let's just celebrate our accomplishments this month and every month, and just continue to love ourselves and love our heritage and our culture in the world of wrestling, and in also wrestling podcasting and content creating. And that's the end of this segment. And now I'm going to go to our Royal Rumble recap and reactions. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the Royal Rumble 2021 and all of its amazing splendor. So like usual, I'm going to start with the women, and I'm going to start with the tag team match for the women's tag team titles that was on the pre-show, and a lot of people were kind of mad about that, but it made sense to me because if you're going to put a women's match before, 3 out of the 4 women in that match were participating in the Royal Rumble later on that night. So they needed to sort of, take some time to condition themselves for that. So it made sense for them to put it, before the show itself. So it made sense. So this is for the women's tag team titles. It was between Asuka and Charlotte versus Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. So this match was pretty good, but I feel like the worst part about it was just the fact that Ric Flair and Lacey Evans reared in their ugly heads to distract Charlotte, and there was even this sick spot in the match where Charlotte hit her famous moonsault from the top rope, and it was really cool. But I really hated how Nia and Shayna threw Asuka out, and we didn't see her anymore because she went behind the announce table. And then Lacey came out, and then Rick actually gave her some type of knuckle buster thing to hit Charlotte in the head with when she was trying to do the figure 8. And then all of a sudden, Lacey hits her in the head, and then they basically take advantage, and then Shayna and Nia wind up winning the women's tag team titles back. And I think the thing that irritated me about this entire feud is just the fact that Nia and Shayna were just talking about how they just can't stand each other, but yet and still they want to still partner up and win the tag titles back. And yeah, they did, but it was due to the underhanded assist from Lacey Evans and Ric Flair. And I think the worst part, even though it's still intriguing, I still think the worst part about the Ric Flair, Charlotte Flair, Lacey Evans feud is just the fact that you willingly see Ric Flair screw his daughter over, all for what? A girl who could very well still be your daughter at the same time. Like, it's so gross. Like, really? But sometimes in some cases, sometimes a lot of the best people in life did not have the best parents. So it's kind of becoming clear, even though I know that this is just, kayfabe, it still kind of sucks to see, a dad, sabotaging his own child, consistently, all for the sake of having this pretty blonde on his arm. Plus, it's also weird because of the fact that we know Ric Flair's wife is actually Miss Wendy, and then Lacey actually has a husband and a child that we've seen on television multiple times. So it's just kind of like, whose idea was this? It's just kind of trashy, and I don't like it. But something that did happen later on in the Women's Royal Rumble match is the fact that Charlotte was telling everybody to move out of the way so she could face Lacey Evans herself. But I believe somewhere down the line, Lacey Evans wound up getting eliminated by somebody else. But because I really wanted Charlotte to eliminate her, and I really wanted Charlotte to beat her up. Like, I'm ready for them to have a one-on-one match. Like, I'm so pumped for it because I'm so sick of her. So I think that's really the point that they're trying to do. I get that they're trying to get under our skin, but Jesus, like, I am tired. Please, Charlotte, hand her a butt whooping for me. So like I said, Nia and Shayna are the women's tag team champions again. But then on Raw this week, you had Lana team up with Naomi, who's back now, and they actually fought in a match, became the number 1 contenders for the women's tag team titles. So I'm here for Team Ravishing Glow. So that's going to be really cool. So then also with the women, you had Sasha Banks versus Carmella for the SmackDown Women's title. And this match was pretty good. Here again, you had Sasha Banks having and pulling the very best out of Carmella. Carmella has definitely improved and gotten way better with each match. Even though, and it makes me so sad to say, it's just like Carmella is getting so much better as an athlete, but yet at the same time, she's still utilizing Reggie, the sommelier. And it's just sort of like, bro, you don't even need him. But she was just trying to be underhanded, and I believe Reggie also got tossed out by the referee when he tried to interfere in the match. And then Carmella was kind of devastated about that, but she still held her own throughout the match. But ultimately, she lost because of that bank statement. You just can't beat that bank statement. But there was a cool point where Carmella did have her code of silence on Sasha Banks, and it looked like Sasha was going to tap out for just a few seconds. I was like, girl, no, please don't tap out. Please don't tap out. No. So she didn't, and Sasha Banks wound up retaining. So she's still our SmackDown Women's Champion. And then, of course, on SmackDown last night, she got in Bianca Belair's face because Bianca, there's a whole lot of, mystery behind who Bianca is going to choose to face. Whether it's going to be Asuka on Raw or Sasha on SmackDown or maybe even Io on NXT. So, I mean, and then Sasha got in her face and said, you may have a lot of things and you may be the roughest and you may be the strongest, but you're definitely not the best, and if you want to face me, but because you may have all of that, but you still don't have the title. So everyone's really pushing for those two to fight because this will be the first time 2 black women have faced each other, at a WrestleMania for a mainstream title. So I really hope they do fight. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and send up hopes and prayers for that. So I'm going to wait to talk about the Women's Royal Rumble at the end. So something else that happened. So I'm going to go into the men now. Goldberg and Drew McIntyre that match was relatively short, but it was still better than I was expecting. Even though there's really only so much Goldberg can do in the ring now since he's in his 50s. And it seems like really a lot of the time the only thing he does during his matches are spears and jackhammers. But Drew McIntyre was able to work around that limited, move set and do what he was able to do. There was one point where he missed a Claymore, and then it looked like Goldberg was going to win, but then he didn't. And then thankfully Drew McIntyre was able to retain the title. But something that was very telling about it, and I said this in a panel with Wrestling Wind Down last night, shout out to them and their podcast, was that there was a sense of finality that came to it, because he actually told Drew, you passed the test, you did a good job and all that other stuff. And I thought that was funny, considering he was one of the main ones who was agreeing with The Undertaker with saying that the company and everything is soft, but he was telling Drew McIntyre, oh, you passed the test, or you did a good job or whatever. On Wrestling Wind Down, they asked if I thought that Goldberg was going to come back and try and win the Rumble to get another shot at the title, and I told him no, because of that moment he had with Drew and how final it felt. So I don't know what's next for Goldberg at this point. Hopefully he'll stay far away from a title picture and stop skipping the line. And maybe he'll just fight somebody else, like maybe a Big E or maybe, Bobby Lashley, who knows. But either way, just stay away from the title picture. And I'm glad Drew still has it, because he has to face Sheamus, and his, backstabbing stuff. And he also has to, keep his head on a swivel, because he can very well face Edge at WrestleMania, or he could be facing The Miz, who could very well cash in on either one of those people. So there's a lot going on with Drew, but I'm glad he still has a title and that he didn't lose to Goldberg, all for the sake of nostalgia. So yay. Also with the men, you had Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens for the Universal title, and I'm not gonna hold you, I was so thrilled with the outcome of the Women's Royal Rumble that my brain was half in and half out on that match. Like, I had blacked out. Like, I was so emotional from the Women's Royal Rumble and the outcome of that I barely paid attention, like, to anything that was happening during the Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens match. But the parts that I did pay attention to was still good from a storytelling, aspect. And I was just surprised because Roman Reigns was just acting a complete donkey. Like, he hurt a referee and ran him into the pole when they were all fighting all outside into the Thunderdome virtual crowd and backstage and everything. And then he got handcuffed to the point to where he possibly couldn't stand. And then the referee was counting. He was almost at 10, but then he got knocked in the head because Roman Reigns pulled him into the steel post. And then Paul Heyman, the advocate, came out and unlocked him from the post, and then he locked in Kevin Owens in his, in his submission move that he does now, and then choked him out, and he wound up retaining the Universal title. So that wasn't entirely surprising there, because, their feud has just been going back and forth, and it looks like it's not going to end, because last night on SmackDown, Edge, came out, because Roman Reigns, wanted him to come out and acknowledge him as the next challenger, as the challenger that Edge would want to face for the Universal title. But then, since all Canadians work together and stay together, Kevin Owens came and gave him a stunner, and that's where SmackDown went off. So it's looking like this whole Kevin Owens thing might still be going on. I don't know. But yeah, it's just, I feel like it's almost becoming long in the tooth now, because it's like, it's been in so many ways that Roman has beat him constantly. So I don't know how long they can I don't know how long they're prepared to keep this up. But I do find it intriguing that Seth Rollins did come back in the Men's Royal Rumble, and he's going to make his return to SmackDown next week. So maybe he'll be the next one to face Roman Reigns, before they get to WrestleMania, because it is just February. WrestleMania is in April. So we'll see what happens. So that's going to be cool. So also with the men, you had the Men's Royal Rumble match. And Edge and Randy Orton were announced as number 1 and number 2 during WWE Backstage the Saturday before. So they proceeded to beat each other up like they have been doing, because, of course, Edge is mad at Randy Orton because Randy Orton put him out of commission, last year after their greatest wrestling match ever thing at Backlash. And this match was really good. I enjoyed the men's Royal Rumble match. I enjoyed all the surprises. I definitely enjoyed seeing the New Day, even though Kofi wasn't able to participate because he's not necessarily cleared yet to fight. But the New Day getting back together dressed in their Brody Lee tribute gear was really cool. And I thought it was funny because during my interview with Janelle from HR, shout out to her and the Jobber Tears podcast, she said it was kind of weird seeing Big E. Well, no, it wasn't during our interview. It was during her episode on the Jobber Tears podcast. She talked about how weird it was seeing Big E with the New Day again, which I did think it was kind of strange, to kind of see them, together again since they've been split up. But that was really cool. And then Damian Priest entered the ring, and I thought that was a great surprise because I was wondering who from NXT, would get the call up, from that. And I'm glad it was Damian Priest because he's kind of done everything he possibly can in NXT at this point. So him on Raw is definitely a good move. So congratulations to him. He did a really good job. And then Carlito came, and that was a great surprise for me too, because I'm not old, but when I was a kid, I didn't like him, and actually my family didn't like him either. My mom and my dad hated him, and my mom specifically hated him because he used to spit in people's faces with the apple, and she feels like if you spit in my face, that's like a killing offense. Like, she will literally hurt you really bad if you ever spit in her face. Like, that is the ultimate sign of disrespect down here. So she used to hate Carlito. But of course, he had an apple when he made his entrance, but he didn't spit in anybody's face, thank God, because if you do that now, that's also a killing offense because the Rona is going around and you need to stop spreading germs. Stay safe, people. Anyway, that was really cool. And then, like I said earlier in News and Gossipers, The Miz came out, which I thought was really surprising, seeing as he's Mr. Money in the Bank. Why are you in the Royal Rumble? He destroyed Bad Bunny's gear on stage, and so he came out, and then Bad Bunny came out, and distracted him and allowed Damian Priest to eliminate Miz and John Morrison. And then Bad Bunny hit them with a dive before Matt Riddle came out. And then Daniel Bryan was after him, and then Kane did come out too. But online, it seemed like nobody was really, that excited to really see Kane, simply because of the fact that he kind of got outed as a person who might have supported something problematic that I won't get into here. So it was just a lot, but it was also funny to see Ricochet because he fought AJ Styles, aka the Royal Rumble Police, to qualify, but then he wound up not winning that match, but then he wound up still being in it. It was just kind of weird. And I hated that AJ Styles came out with Omos because my boyfriend kept saying, oh, AJ Styles gonna win, AJ Styles gonna win. And then Omos was eliminating people on behalf of AJ Styles, and that kept irritating me. And especially when he eliminated Big E. I was so angry because Big E was definitely one of my favorites to win, and I was so angry that he eliminated him on his behalf. In what world is that okay? I really thought that you had to be eliminated from somebody in the match and not somebody from outside. That made me angry. But I guess if someone from the outside can keep you from getting eliminated, then I guess maybe the outside person can eliminate you. I don't know. It was weird, and it just made me mad. So I'm just ranting about that right now. Then King Corbin came out, and he got eliminated by Dominic, which I thought was a really big move for someone who just started wrestling on television last year. That was really cool. And then Bobby Lashley came out and eliminated Dominic, and he also eliminated Damian Priest. But then the Hurricane showed up, and I lost my mind when I heard his music because I love Hurricane. Because he was one of my favorites when I was younger. And plus, it's just he had the H on his chest, and that's my initial. That's my last initial. So it's just I really resonated with him. That was one of the first wrestling t-shirts I ever had, where he had it looked like he was on the cover of a comic book. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but he had a t-shirt where it looked like he was on the cover of a comic book, and it said, "Stand back, it's a hurricane coming through." Like, I loved him. So to see him in a Royal Rumble match made me so happy, because last time I saw him on TV, he was on Say Yes to the Dress with his wife. So that was really funny. I really loved seeing him, but he got eliminated by Bobby Lashley and Big E. So all the eliminations happened, and then Cesaro was in the match, and he was another one of my favorites to win, along with Mustafa Ali, but then he got eliminated later on. And then Cesaro got eliminated, and Braun Strowman came out, and he eliminated AJ Styles, thank God. And then Seth Rollins eliminated Daniel Bryan, and he was one of my favorites to win too. But then Rollins eliminated Matt Riddle, and then it was really the only ones who were left was Braun Strowman, Edge, Christian and Rollins, and then basically Seth Rollins eliminated Christian, and then Edge and Christian had a really good moment too, where they hugged each other. And because there was a moment where Christian wasn't cleared to wrestle, so it was good to see them, have that little moment, which totally reeked of awesomeness. That was so sweet. But then Seth Rollins eliminated Christian, and Edge threw out Rollins. And then Randy Orton, who had basically left the ring due to a supposed injury, RKO'd Edge. And then Edge still wound up eliminating him. So Edge wound up winning the men's Royal Rumble match. And it was funny because they were saying it was 10 years to the day he won a Royal Rumble before. So it was really cool to see that, to see him, win another Royal Rumble match. And a lot of people, including one of my podcasting friends, Sir Wilkins of the Job of Tears podcast, who's going to be on the show next week, he basically said he felt like Edge was sort of taking the spotlight away from someone younger who could have won and used that opportunity. But he took it back by saying that it looks like Edge is going to use that platform to put on the wrestlers of the present, which is something that a lot of legends don't necessarily do. A lot of legends try to put themselves over, but this isn't what Edge is doing. He's putting over the talent of the present day by going on each show and, giving them a rub and giving them a handshake and saying, "Hey, I see you. You remind me of me," or "I could fight you," or "I never had the NXT title," or something like that. So congratulations to Edge. So he won. So that's cool. Now, to the women in this women's Royal Rumble. I'm going to try not to get too emotional talking about it. Bayley came out first. Then Naomi came out at number 2, which made me really happy because she hadn't been back lately, and she was out, a while, with some sickness. So I'm glad to see her again, and her outfit was killer. There was even a spot where she did a busted challenge. She did the busted challenge dance, and I was like, yeah, girl, do it. And then Bianca Belair came out at number 3, and she went after Bayley, who she had fought on SmackDown and actually defeated on SmackDown the week before. And there was just a lot of great athleticism on the part of Bianca Belair and Naomi. They were both showing why there are two of the premier black female athletes on the main roster right now. Like, that was really incredible. Then Billie Kay came out, but then she decided to sit with the commentary team and sort of watch everybody else fight before she decided to get in on the action. And then Shotzi Blackheart came down in her tank, and even though Billie Kay was trying to get in her face, she shot the tank missile at her, and that was really funny and cute. And then Shayna Baszler came out at number 6, and then she knocked Kay down on the way to the ring. And then Toni Storm came out, and I thought that was cool because I'm like, yay, NXT. And she ignored Billie Kay's request to team up, with somebody or whatever. And then Blackheart, Shotzi wound up being the first woman eliminated, and that made me sad because I love her. She's my favorite wrecking ball. But then Jillian Hall made a surprise appearance, and then she came out and started singing her song, "I Know You Want Me," and all that other stuff, and I was just like, wow. And it was funny because I was watching with my boyfriend and his family, and it was a couple people that they didn't necessarily know. And I was just like, yeah, Jillian Hall used to come out there and sing, you know, and all this other stuff. It was just kind of interesting because there was a point where my boyfriend had stopped watching it and they weren't watching it, and then he got right back into it. So for me, it was just kind of like, you know, throwback candy. So it was so cool to see her. And then she actually teamed up with Billie Kay, and that was really cool. So then Ruby Riott came out next, and then she got to work with Billie Kay. And then Victoria came out at number 10, and this here again was more throwback candy because she was one of my favorites, and she was one of my dad's favorites too. Like, we love Victoria, and her feud with Trish Stratus was one of the best female feuds they had during that time. I was like, yes, 2000s, stand up 2000s, we're here. Anyway, then Peyton Royce came out, and then the Iconics reunited, you know, at a certain point. But then Billie Kay was looking like she was kind of hesitant to do the Iconics pose, and Peyton was like, what are you doing? And all this other stuff. And then they tried to take down Victoria. And then Santana Garrett from NXT came out at number 12. And then Liv Morgan came out after her with her beautiful chaps that she had on. And then somebody on social media made a meme saying, oh, and with Legend saying, they're just, these new superstars are so disrespectful. But then they had a picture of Liv Morgan's outfit with her chaps on, which basically gave Shawn Michaels vibes. And I'm just like, Anyway, then we had the Riot Squad, you know, eliminate Jillian. But then they also took out Billie Kay too. But then Rhea Ripley came in at number 14, and she was the one that I was the most worried about because I predicted that Bianca Belair was going to win it all. But in my mind, I felt like, bruh, if Rhea Ripley comes here, she might be the one that might wreck my dreams. But we're going to keep going and keep talking about it. And then she threw Toni Storm out, and then Baszler eliminated Victoria with a chokehold. And I was like, God dang it. And then Rhea Ripley sent Santana Garrett out, and then Charlotte came in at number 15. Then Bayley eliminated Ruby Riott with a power bomb to the floor, and then Dana Brooke came in. And then Peyton Royce eliminated Liv Morgan, and then Tori Wilson came in, and this led me to thinking, bro, what if Dawn Marie came in? Because that was like her worst rival ever, and that would give me all the life. But she didn't, but it's okay. Then Rhea Ripley hit Dana Brooke with a powerbomb under the apron to eliminate her just before Ric Flair came out to accompany Lacey Evans. But then just as soon as she got to the ring, Charlotte was like, y'all better move out the way because I'm finna beat her up. And that's exactly what she did. And then Peyton Royce was eliminated by Charlotte. And then Shayna Baszler took out Tori Wilson while Bianca eliminated Bayley. And the cameraman did a horrible job at this, you know, in terms of storytelling, because just last week, Bianca beat Bayley one-on-one in a match fair and square. And then she eliminated Bayley, but we didn't see that. And I'm just like, so who eliminated her? Like, I was looking around kind of lost, like, what happened? But then they said that Bianca, you know, eliminated her off camera, and then they replayed it. So I was like, okay, fine. So then Mickie James came out, and she came out at number 19, and it was good to see her because we really hadn't seen her since the Legends Night Raw. And I just need her to get back into the ring and actually fight again, because she was doing a really good job until she lost to Asuka in that weird way, and then we hadn't seen her anymore. So I believe she was injured. And then Nikki Cross came out, and then it was starting to get crowded again as Alicia Fox joined the match. And I was so happy to see her because I'm just like, yes, Alicia. And then R-Truth came out and thought it was the men's Royal Rumble, and then he had to fight off several people who was chasing him for the 24/7 championship. But then Alicia rolled him up in the ring to win the 24/7 title. So I thought that was pretty funny because, I mean, it's a very kooky thing that happened because Alicia Fox is the kooky one. So I thought that was funny. Then Mandy Rose came out, and then she fought with Alicia Fox before throwing her over the top rope. And I was hoping that she was going to do a little bit better in this match, but it's okay. They never let Mandy Rose really shine anymore, and I think that's sad. Then R-Truth rolled her up to get the title back, and Dakota Kai ran to the ring and began fighting with Rhea Ripley. And then Mickie James got eliminated by Lacey Evans before Carmella came out at number 24. And then Dakota Kai and Dana Brooke were eliminated by Rhea Ripley. So Rhea Ripley just kind of went on a tear. And then Carmella threw Nikki Cross out just as Tamina came to the ring. And then Reggie dropped Carmella and then caused her to be eliminated. So I'm just like, you see, Reggie, this is what you get when you get in women's business. You never do your job right. And then he also got whipped by Bianca on SmackDown last night. So that was really funny and really cool because finally Bianca used her braid to whoop somebody on the main roster. Finally. Then Belair and Naomi worked together to avoid elimination. And I thought this was a very beautiful part to me because usually you have it where each woman is trying to eliminate each other. But as they were trying to eliminate each other and as they saw it couldn't work for the both of them, Naomi was like, girl, we got to work together. And so they held hands and lifted each other up. And I was like, yes. And it was so beautiful, and it was so beautiful to see the unity among the black female superstars as opposed to seeing Omos, eliminating Big E. It just irritated me. Anyway, they worked together. Either way, Lana came out at number 26 looking all kinds of serious in her gold outfit that matched up with Natalia's, and that was cute. And then Alexa Bliss came out at 27. I was kind of worried about her too because she did just have that Raw Women's Championship match against Asuka, and I was thinking, oh my god, what if they're trying to beef them up and then she wins the Rumble? That was going to irritate me. But then before Alexa Bliss could drop the lights and transform into her Fiend alter ego, Ripley eliminated her, and I thought that was so funny because someone on social media actually said, that Rhea Ripley has watched enough Dragon Ball Z to know where that was going, so she eliminated her, and I was like, ha! So that was funny. And then Ember Moon came in and gave an eclipse to Shayna Baszler, and then Nia Jax came out at 29 and eliminated Lacey Evans and Ember Moon. And then Naomi was taken out by Nia Jax and Baszler because they were just eliminating people left and right. And then they were working together to take out Tamina, which made me sad because Nia was like, but that's my cousin though, I can't. But then they eliminated her anyway, and I'm just like, well, I guess family isn't that strong. And then Nia threw Shayna Baszler out of the ring before Lana eliminated her. And that was a big moment. And I thought that was payback for all the torture that Nia Jax put Lana through. I was like, you got thrown out by your worst enemy. And then Natalya came out at number 30. And then Jackson Baszler attacked Natty before she even got to the ring and attacked everybody else before they left because they was mad. And then Natty threw Lana out of the ring to bring it down to her, Charlotte, Bianca, and Ripley as the last four. But then Bianca eliminated Natalya. So really the final three were Bianca, Ripley, and freaking Charlotte. And this was a full circle moment for me because just last year, around this time, it was this program in NXT involving Rhea Ripley as the NXT Women's Champion, Bianca Belair as the woman who was going to challenge her, and Charlotte as the woman who was going to challenge her as the winner of the Royal Rumble last year. And I'll never forget when Charlotte went to NXT to get in Rhea Ripley's face as they were beefing up their match for TakeOver Portland. Charlotte basically got in Rhea Ripley's face and basically forgot about Bianca Belair and said, and as Bianca was saying, you don't even go here, Charlotte was like, this is a conversation for champions, and pushed her off to the side and made it seem like she was a non-factor. Well, guess what? She is one. So they fought hard, and then Bianca and Rhea had this amazing spot where they both eliminated Charlotte Flair from the match. And they kept dangling at the end, as they were trying to eliminate each other. And then they pushed and then pulled each other back up. And a lot of people online were talking a whole lot of crap about how Bianca didn't win because her feet touched the ground. No, her feet did not touch the ground. She was dangling. Her feet did not touch the ground. Both feet did not touch the ground. She won the match. Shut up. Either way, they got back in the ring and they kept hitting each other with all kinds of finishes, which was almost a callback to their match at TakeOver Portland. And then as they kept hitting each other, there was a point where Rhea Ripley was on the ropes. Bianca Belair clotheslined her over the top rope, and Bianca won the Women's Royal Rumble, making her the first black woman to ever win the Women's Royal Rumble, even though there's only been 4 winners, and the second black person to ever win a Royal Rumble match next to The Rock in 2000. Y'all, I jumped in the air. I almost cried. Like, I was so happy. I was doing like a worship, like shout dance. Like, y'all, I was so excited for her. She was crying. She was thanking her mom and her dad and her husband, Montez Ford, like, who was backstage watching and gave her a hug and prayed over her after she won. Like, they was crying in each other's arms. It was a whole vibe. Like, I was so happy for her, because not only because I predicted it, but because I saw, like, when I first started this podcast, I loved Bianca Belair, you know, from the jump, from having seen her in NXT Live and seeing her and her athleticism and seeing how she had grown. And I always wanted her to be put in this position, because this was a woman who was winning contests with their NXT Combine and lifting over 400 pounds, you know, and winning about maybe 4 or 5 years in a row. This girl faced Shayna Baszler when someone named Sam Roberts was throwing mad shade at her and saying that she wasn't, you know, ready for this type of thing, or talking about how she doesn't deserve this opportunity because this isn't a championship match and it shouldn't be a championship match because she's just not worthy of this moment and all that other crap. I saw her, you know, come out with all of her black glamour when she came out with the whole Black History in the Making outfit that she made, like, and how she was proving herself, and then it seemed like she got pushed to the side for the whole Charlotte Flair Rhea Ripley thing, and how everybody was pushing, you know, for that triple threat between them, but it didn't happen because they were prepping Bianca Belair to make her main roster debut at WrestleMania and to be on Raw, only to get traded to SmackDown, and only to have the run that she's had with Bayley and all of the above. Like, she has done nothing but get better and better each time, and it blesses me because I remember when Naomi had to work twice as hard to even get a title opportunity again, because she was in the picture to possibly win the Divas Championship from Paige or from AJ at that time, but it was always between Paige and AJ and never between Naomi all the time. And you had to wait darn near almost 5 or 6 years until she got an opportunity at another title again. And it is just, and then you have people like Kofi Kingston, who had to wait 11 years to get his chance at the WWE Championship, you know, to win it out of WrestleMania. I've seen so much go on with black wrestlers, you know, during my time as a wrestling fan, and where you've seen people like Shelton Benjamin, who had all the athleticism to go after a mainstream championship like that, but never had his opportunity. Like where you saw Booker T and him get screwed over out of his opportunity with Triple H. Like, it was a miracle seeing somebody like Bianca Belair win this Royal Rumble, not only for herself and not only for Knoxville, Tennessee, where she's from, and for her parents, for her husband and all that, but to win it for girls like me, where you get disrespected constantly over and over again because people don't think that you know about wrestling, or don't think that you know what could work and what couldn't work. How people, you know, curse you out and say all kinds of disrespectful things to you as a black female fan, and don't think that you know enough, or you having to prove that you know just as much, if not more, than the average white male fan or the average white male podcasting hosts. And that's no shade to any of the other podcasting hosts who I've, you know, had the privilege of working with, but there's so much that goes into it, you know, and being a wrestling fan of color and being a woman, and because they feel like you don't know what you're talking about, and they feel like you only watching it just to drool over the men. No, baby, I've been watching this as a sport since I was 4 years old, before I even knew what drooling over a man even meant. So don't you do that. And to see somebody like Bianca Belair win with the confidence that she has meant the world to me, baby, because she has confidence that came at a price, baby. Because if you watch her chronicle, she suffered through depression, through eating disorders, and not wanting to be here on this planet anymore to make her athletic dreams come true. She didn't know that this was even a dream for her, or even a possibility for her, but she had somebody else see her in her CrossFit journey and see her as a black woman, you know, to a black man like Mark Henry. He saw her and saw that she was worthy enough to be a star. And baby, she did that. And she made every opportunity that she was given, and and made it work for her. And she has all this confidence that I wish I had in myself sometimes. And she made it work for her. And now she is up here, being an amazing representation for Black females in wrestling. We are here. We are taking up space. All women of color, Asian, Hispanic women, all of us are up at Native American women, transgender women, all of us. We up in here taking up space, and there's nothing you can do about it. We are here to stay. And if you don't like it, cry about it later. But we here. Bianca Belair is here. She is our Royal Rumble winner, and I will see it for her and stand for her. No, regardless of who she decides to face. Even though preferably I would prefer if she faced Sasha Banks, because we'll have 2 Black women going for a mainstream women's title for the first time ever. I hope she faces her, because I can deal with Black Comic-Con versus the HBCU homecoming, as somebody said online on Facebook this week. I'm here for it. Let's do it, because it is about time that we stand up and take our rightful place in wrestling. And that's all I got to say about that, baby. We here. And we here, boo. We here. This is our time, and it's full circle, because last year I was talking about how Bianca Belair was making Black history in the making, and she made it this year. It's full circle, baby. We up in here. And that's it. And that's the end of this segment. That's the end of this Royal Rumble segment, y'all. I'm through. All right, so thank you so much for listening to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and follow me on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. You can listen to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast for free on the Anchor app. You can listen to it on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you can get your podcasts. If you're listening to this on Monday, today's Saturday, but if you're listening to this on Monday will mark 1 year since the Hardy Wrestling Podcast was created and founded. So this is me taking this time out to thank each and every person who's ever supported my show, ever bought my, the first run of my t-shirts, who's ever listened to my show, ever interviewed on my show, and all the above. Thank you so much. Like, when I started this show, I was in a transition period in my life where nothing was making sense. I lost my job. Creatively, I just had so much I wanted to say. Emotionally, there was so much I wanted to do. So this podcast was a means of me doing that, and in terms of talking about something I love. And it was right around Royal Rumble time where I had my first episode, which was called Random Girl Random Podcast, because I didn't think anybody would want to listen to somebody like me, because usually when you see people with podcasts, they be famous people or people who know a lot about a certain thing, who are experts in their field or whatever. I'm just an ordinary girl who works a full-time job and has other interests outside of wrestling that goes into self-help, and I go to church all the time, and I love music and stuff like that. And I love to read. So I didn't think anybody really wanted to listen to me talk about wrestling. But over the course of the year, it's clear that there is a place for my voice. And I've learned the value of it. And the value of making space, for wrestlers and other professionals in wrestling and podcasters, to be on their show and tell their stories. And I enjoy doing it so very much. And I'm just so grateful for the wrestling family that I've created, from this platform, and I'm excited for what's to come. So thank you so much for supporting the show throughout this whole year, and I'm really grateful for everyone who has helped me and given me great ideas. But I want to send a special thank you to the higher power in my life. God, thank you so much for giving me the courage and the creativity to even, try this. And I want to send a special thank you to my parents for believing in me, even when they weren't exactly sure what a podcast truly was. They were still grateful. They were still supportive in that. And I definitely want to send a special thank you to Najaquin McCoy, my boyfriend and the love of my life, who has given me such great ideas and inspired me to keep going in the moments, or the one major moment where I did, consider quitting. And and for also being a guest on my show, even when he didn't want to, because he's an introvert, on the Love 20 episode. Thank you so much for that. There is nothing I can do to repay you for everything that you've done for my life, even before the podcast, but hopefully this is a start into it. I just thank you, and I love you so much, and I'm grateful for your presence in my life. And I just thank each and every person who's ever helped me whenever I've messaged them or DM'd them or had a question about anything. And for other podcasters who've just done an amazing job and allowed me to even come on their show and talk wrestling and stuff. So I'm just really grateful for this journey. And I'm grateful for all of you for even joining me on this journey as well. So until next time, this is the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl, Stephanie Hardy. Until next time, bye, y'all.